Good morning and welcome to Total Jobs' latest live webinar. My name is Amber. I work at Total Jobs as an Enterprise Account Director, and I'm really looking forward to today's session. The research that we're sharing today looks at how employers can make their career journey more equitable by championing the Black and South Asian women in their business and tackling the barriers that stunt career progression and negatively impact mental well-being. We'll be sharing the report packed full of insights and advice with all attendees. And I would also like to introduce my colleague, Tina, who has been involved in the creation of the report. She works at Diversity Trust. Tina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Amber. So yes, my name is Tinashe Verhaeghe, and you'll hear me being referred to as Tina. And because names are important, I just want to contextualize that. Tinashe is my Zimbabwean name, my Shona name, and culturally we use nicknames. So when someone calls me Tinashe, I feel like I'm in trouble because my mom only ever calls me Tinashe when I'm in trouble. So I go by Tina. I'm a race and ethnicity consultant with an organization called the Diversity Trust. And I'm also a senior advisor on the Race Equality Charter Mark that's run by an organization called Advance HE. I conduct various training, consultancy, research with across sectors on issues to do with inclusion, diversity, and in this case, it's really a pleasure to be doing this piece of work with Total Jobs and to be sharing it with you all. Yes, thank you. Back to you, Amber.
Thank you so much. So before we kick off, just a few bits of housekeeping. Obviously, this is a live event, and for the benefit of anyone who wasn't able to attend, we are recording the session as well. So the session is recorded. We do have a live comment box, so if you do have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them through to us. If we've got time at the end, we will of course do our best to kind of pick those up as we go. Please do also keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow for any of the key findings, because what we'll do is run through everything, and then today we'll be joined by a brilliant panel who'll be discussing some of the topics that we raise in the research in more detail, and a full report and the recording will be sent out for you as well. So first of all, for anyone who doesn't actually know Total Jobs, we're a recruitment solutions partner. So basically what that means is that we work with employers to attract and recruit the people that they need to help grow their business. We offer innovations that drive the hiring process, whatever the priorities and challenges of your business. And we do this with an important goal in mind, and that's to find the right job for everyone. In turn, we believe that companies, no matter how big or small, should be empowered to win the right talent to ensure the future business success.
Just to talk a little bit about Diversity Trust, we're a community interest company with a mission to influence social change in order to create a fairer and safer society. We're specialists in equality, diversity, and inclusion. We provide a suite of training across all protected characteristics, including creating bespoke packages and sessions focused on the experiences of Black and South Asian women in particular, informed by the research that we've done, as well as just research in the topic that's available. Training includes all areas of race and racism, managing and mitigating bias, speaking out, disability awareness training, autism and neurodiversity, just to name a few. And all of this is because we are passionate about equipping individuals and leaders to be more inclusive in their practice. So from the initial job search and interview to setting foot in the workplace and the journey to senior management, this research follows the career paths of Black and South Asian women in the UK. We decided to focus on the experiences of Black and South Asian women because we know that there is evidence of structural and institutional racism that racially minoritized people face. And we also know that gender equality, gender awareness is a really important topic to still focus on. And we know that there is really, there are more important nuances to focus on in this intersection. Data shows us that systemic and institutional racism is evident across all areas and facets of society, from education, healthcare, policing. And we hope that by having this focus, we can offer evidence-based recommendations to employers who are reviewing organizational culture, policies, and practices to remove these structural biases. the voices and experiences of the women who took part in the survey and the focus groups is at the heart of this research. We are really grateful for everyone who contributed, and people contributed so generously in both the surveys and the focus groups, and there is a wealth of experience and expertise that we're able to share now because of how generous they were. Where the stats are of the sample of Black and South Asian women show a discrepancy of 5% or less, we record this as one stat. Otherwise, we'll split them to highlight how the experience differs. So sometimes you'll see Black and South Asian women, sometimes you'll see Black women and South Asian women. And we will draw on comparisons with white men and white women as well. And for more information and to dig deeper in this, you can look through the report that will be shared after the session.
Amazing. So as Tina said, what we're going to be doing is following through the lives and career paths of women who were involved in our focus groups. So we're going to start the journey at the pre-employment stage. So thinking about the aspirations and influences of young Black and South Asian women and girls before they head into the world of work. And one of our focus group participants actually said, "My daughter asked me, how can I aspire to be something that does not exist? You have to be a trailblazer and then also be seen as a single story." And this was a woman who works in community development. And that really sets the scene for how we kind of go forward and the research that we've learned in the report. So before entering employment, what we're seeing is that 55% of Black women and 49% of South Asian women felt that they had a female role model who looked like them, who was relatable to them, working in their preferred career. So despite relatively high levels of representation, a third, so that's 34% of Black and South Asian women were discouraged from pursuing a certain career path by either a member of staff during their education. 3/4 of our respondents took on work experience before they entered full-time employment. So a common experience cited by Black and South Asian women is the expectation to be more experienced or even overqualified for a role in order to see the same success as a white person. That being said, participating in work experience can require privilege, especially considering work experience is often unpaid. Out of the quarter who did not take part in the work experience, 75% of Black and South Asian women said that this is because the opportunities just weren't available to them, and 16% said that they simply couldn't afford to take part. Perhaps in part because this access to work experience opportunities after completing education, the majority of Black and South Asian women believe they could achieve anything in their future career. And this is significantly higher than the confidence reported by white men at the same stage of life. However, if we fast forward to further into their careers, the confidence of Black women begins to fall, while the confidence of South Asian women actually stagnates. The workplaces they enter should be places that nurture, support, and champion their ambitions and talent, but that's not the case. Meanwhile, the confidence in white men actually increases. And this is owing to the work environments that they're finding themselves in meeting their needs. They can feel psychologically safer, and that means that over time their confidence builds. For example, we see the confidence reported by white men steadily increasing over time. However, the overall high levels of confidence from Black and South Asian women shows the amazing determination and self-belief, and that's regardless of the barriers faced overall in the workplace. So moving on to actually applying for jobs. On this topic, one of our focus group participants said that just being qualified for a job is no longer enough for people of colour, and especially women of colour. We have to jump through so many more hoops for the same jobs. One time, a colleague sniggered at me and said, "You're a diversity hire." I have a double master's and have co-founded my own startup, but apparently that wasn't enough. On average, it takes Black women, just over 5 months to secure their first job after leaving education. And it takes just under 5 months for South Asian women to do the same. So it's quite similar. In comparison, the average time taken for white men is 3.4 months, with white women being so much lower at 2.8 months. We know that of the ethnicity data the Office of National Statistics provides, the unemployment rate is highest for Bangladeshi women, and that's 12.2% unemployment. And that's followed by Black women at 10.9%, Pakistani women at 9.5%, but for white men it's 3.4%. I've already mentioned how Totaljobs is focused on offering innovations that drive the hiring process to do our part in finding the right job for everyone. And that's why I really wanted to make mention of Equality Boost, which is one such innovation that the Totaljobs team can explore with you further when it comes to implementing a practical way to make your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy a reality and really connect with underrepresented groups in the UK. But connecting with those groups is, of course, only the start of the DE&I journey for businesses. When we're looking at access to employment and we're looking at the job interview, the actual interview stage puts further pressure on Black and South Asian women. 3/4 have changed their demeanour to appear more approachable and friendly in an attempt to counteract negative stereotypes, while 73% of Black women and 63% of South Asian women have felt they need to tone down certain turns of phrase or mannerisms at interview stage. A huge 3/5 have been made to feel uncomfortable, patronised, or intimidated during interview due to their ethnicity. And while just over half report the same as a result of their gender. So, what actions should be taken with these experiences in mind? And we asked our respondents exactly this. Just over 2/5 highlighted the need to include your business approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion in your job advert. Interrogating bias in job adverts is also a key action when it comes to making your job ad more inclusive. And you can use the Totaljobs Gender Bias Decoder for eliminating any unintended bias. And we're always looking into how we can expand our offering to help further. From our research, we know that 1/3 of Black and South Asian women were discouraged from pursuing a certain career by a member of staff during their education. This messaging can make them feel like a certain career paths are unrealistic, unachievable. And employers can counter this messaging by understanding the perceptions, wants, and needs of potential candidates and taking these into account when thinking about their employer brand offering with experts like Universum. And finally, as mentioned earlier, we know that Black and South Asian women are among those who wait longer to see success in their job search. Diversifying your recruitment methods to broaden your talent pools enables you to position your opportunities in front of people who are underrepresented. With that, I would like to take a moment to announce that Totaljobs Group Limited will be donating 5% of profits from the sales of our Equality Boost product from July the 1st to December the 31st to Blueprint for All. Formerly the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust, Blueprint for All are a registered charity and their charity number is 11022267. They work with young people, including through mentoring programs, careers talks, and really meaningful workplace visits to bring more opportunities to everyone regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. We actually have Blueprint for All on the call today, so shout out to the team and the brilliant work that you're doing. We're really looking forward to working closely with you in the coming months and continuing our partnership. So looking more into the application process and actions for a more inclusive application process. Access to career advice throughout the application stages would be beneficial for over 1/3 of Black and South Asian women, which could help the process to seem less one-sided. Similarly, networking groups could help to engage with applicants beyond the more formal job interview. And at that interview stage, hiring managers should be checking themselves by asking them questions that interrogate their own bias outside of normal unconscious bias training. This is where diverse interview panels can also help. Introducing a role such as an independent DE&I challenger who can look at your application process holistically to see what can be improved can also be useful. Finally, we know that many recruiters still aren't giving feedback to applicants, but this makes such a big difference to future success. If someone is unsuccessful with your company, think about that candidate at their next job interview. What feedback or advice could you give to them to help them in their career journey? Similarly, ask the candidate for their feedback. Did they have any ideas on how the process could be more inclusive? You can build up a strong picture this way, and it also shows you're actively putting in the work to continually improve. Tina, yeah.
Thank you. So focusing on progression and opportunity now. As Black and South Asian women move further into their careers, they should be met with equal opportunity, a supportive network, and the chance to build their skills to enable them to reach senior level and whatever their ambition may be. However, systemic hurdles persist, which have a knock-on effect on the opportunities women have to thrive and to be themselves at work. On this topic, one of our focus group participants said this: I had to prove myself a lot more. I have the sense that now that I have the role, I am required to prove myself because of my background. And this was a Black British woman in a senior managerial role in public administration. Our research showed us that almost 2/3, so 64%, of Black and South Asian women who are at managerial levels state that their identity had a negative impact on their progression onto that position of leadership. When we drill down into the detail, 48% of Black women and 51% of South Asian women reported their ethnicity as being a factor, while 27% of Black women and 20% of South Asian women reported their gender. The higher up the ladder, the more pressure is felt, whether that's to prove your worth, to feel that pressure to act as that role model, that the idea of the model minority, which comes with the pressure around, do I complain when I see something's going wrong or do I not? And other really kind of cognitively draining considerations, or feeling like their work is held up to a higher scrutiny, which came out in both the focus groups as well as the survey. Despite these pressures, 3/5, that's 59% of Black and South Asian women agree that their employer supports their career goals and ambitions, with similar figures reported by white men and women. Black and South Asian women want support that ranges from career counseling to safe spaces to create a sense of community, to explicit comments, explicit commitments to diversity and inclusion across all levels of the business, more transparency about available routes to promotion and associated salary. 4/5 of Black and South Asian women have faced discrimination in the workplace, which is just a staggeringly high figure. Less than 1/5 of those who faced a type of discrimination have reported this, with only 8% of those who reported saying it led to a positive or constructive outcome. Oh, sorry. We're going to now look at the discrimination and psychological safety. Discrimination experienced by Black and South Asian women in the workplace is alarmingly high and has significant long-term impact on their well-being. There is an urgent need for data-led and collaborative inclusion strategies. The impact of discrimination came up as a big focus in both the focus groups, with people talking about, for instance, one of the participants said, I had to resign for a second time from a position where I've been treated inappropriately and differently to my white male colleagues. And the impact of the discrimination is something that stuck with me from both focus groups. again, 4/5 of Black and South Asian women have faced discrimination in the workplace, with less than a fifth of those who face discrimination reporting it, and only 8% of those who've reported saying it led to a positive or constructive outcome. Many feel unable to report because they don't feel comfortable in doing so. They lack confidence in the resolution, or they don't believe the business would take the report seriously, and that they would experience gaslighting. Respondents also cited that they were concerned that they would be penalized for reporting an incident, while others were unsure of the process to follow and the support available. Looking at the reasons that people have cited for not reporting and the responses they've given to the actions they'd like to see their organizations take, Black and South Asian women want businesses to do the following relating to discrimination. The key piece I want to highlight here is the issue of gaslighting persisting across organizations, creating additional barriers for women in the workplace. Their lived experience of discrimination is denied, and so businesses and their HR teams must ensure they are properly acknowledging the impact of the incident and follow this through with committed actions to address the incident. With this, employers must ensure the well-being of the person who has experienced racism or sexism or any form of discrimination is protected. Looking at mental health and well-being, which is connected to the impact of discrimination, one of the focus group participants said, "I'm resilient but exhausted." And this was a South Asian British woman who is in community development. Almost 2/3, 62%, of Black and South Asian women say their well-being has suffered at work. In comparison, 49% of white men reported suffering with their well-being at work at some stage in their careers, while 52% of white women reported the same. Of the Black and South Asian women who have struggled with their well-being at work, only 3 in 10 have received good levels of support, whether that's paid time off, access to a counselor, reduced workload, or other related actions. However, 1 in 8 say when they reached out for support, they did not receive any. Less than a third felt comfortable reaching out for support in the first place. It's no surprise that we're seeing this level of impact on well-being, given what we know about responses to discrimination incidents, alongside that persistent pressure that comes with navigating a workplace where you face barriers as a result of your ethnicity and gender. In fact, 70% of Black women and 64% of South Asian women have felt the need to code switch, which is changing the language they use, their tone of voice, name, mannerisms, physical appearance in their career. This constant self-censorship leaves many women feeling uncomfortable, undervalued, tired, invisible, or at the opposite end of the scale, hypervisible, defeated, and anxious. Black and South Asian women continue to have the experiences of racism and to have their experiences of racism and discrimination invalidated. We see this often where people reach out for help and describe the racism they faced, and the response from HR well-being is, well, could they have meant this? Or is there a different way we could look at it? Which is invalidating their experience. With this in mind, the creation of safe spaces for communities alongside explicit acknowledgement of the existence of racism and sexism in the workplace and active listening is essential for the overall well-being of Black and South Asian women. And it's our hope that seeing the data that we've collected will give organizations that evidence they need that there is racism and sexism in their workplaces, and they can start from that position of acknowledging. Alongside this, well-being programs built on the intersectionality of ethnicity and mental health are key. Having race-literate mental health initiatives is really important. Support must be tailored to be able to appropriately meet the needs of Black and South Asian women. Some key takeaways and thoughts we want to leave with you based on the research we've gathered throughout this campaign. We have detailed the pressures felt by Black and South Asian women when it comes to climbing the career ladder and overcoming the obstacles they are faced with. This impacts mental health, even while we continue to see high levels of determination and ambition from the women we spoke to. As an employer, you need to acknowledge that racial and gendered inequalities exist in your business and wider society. We know gaslighting persists when it comes to discrimination, which creates additional barriers and impacts mental well-being. Do your bit to validate the feelings and experiences of Black and South Asian women. This should be played out at all levels of the business, including and importantly at senior leadership level to create real change. Finally, the recommendations shared today have the opinions and experiences of Black and South Asian women at the heart of them. With any actions you're taking away to your business, co-create your strategies with Black and South Asian women to reflect the diversity of voices and experiences. This also means no assumptions are made around someone's lived experience or the experiences of your specific organization. Intersections of identity have a significant impact, which requires a tailored approach. Thank you.
Amazing. Tina, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me and presenting all that content. I know that you had a really big part to play in the collection of the data and the focus group, so it's so nice to have you on the call and doing that for us.
Thanks, Amber.
Thank you. So now it's time to turn to our panel. So joining Tina on our panel, we have Sharika and Victoria. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hi everyone, my name is Sarika Sharma and I'm a race and unconscious bias consultant with the Diversity Trust, and I worked on the research for this report, so it's great to be here today discussing a really important and groundbreaking piece of research, so thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to apologise as well. I think I mispronounced your name there. I do apologise. And Victoria, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Really excited to be here. My name is Victoria Zubike. I am the founder of the US Group, which essentially is an organization which really works with organizations that are keen and want to support diverse talent, particularly women at entry level. So we do a lot of work providing forums and events for organizations essentially to connect, meet, collaborate, and understand how they could really connect with the next generation of talent.
Amazing. And some of the work that your foundation does is absolutely incredible. Just for the benefit of the audience as well, I learned this when I met Victoria for the first time, is that she's actually placed people into Totaljobs as well. So yeah, it's fantastic, and it's really exciting to have you guys here. So Victoria, we are seeing that Black women specifically are having to wait 5.1 months, and South Asian women are having to wait 4.9 months to secure their first job after they've left education. And that's significantly more than white women. And that's despite having high levels of ambition. So in your eyes, what do you think this is? And how does your business strive to combat this while welcoming and supporting more young women?
This is such a great question, and I wanted to really break it down into 4 key areas essentially on, why is there such a long process for Black and South Asian women to enter the workplace, number 1, and then, what organizations can essentially do, like partnering with organizations like myself. The first one, I think, is that when there is a lack of access to role models in your organization who represent the talent pool you're trying to attract, that's already a fundamental, barrier. Essentially, for a lot of people, seeing is believing, and we did see that in the case studies that were presented. If you don't see someone who represents your viewpoints, your stand, it's almost impossible to think, actually, is that organization for me? Do they represent me? I remember when I was in the workforce and how difficult sometimes it was for me to connect or just want to, get involved, because I wasn't sure who I could go to essentially who represented me, or I didn't see how I could progress across certain progress essentially, because so unfortunately, there just was not enough diverse women in senior level positions. we know that, you know, there is a shortage when it does come to senior level positions, and I understand that is an issue. But I think fundamentally what organizations can do here is making sure that talent that could be used as role model are available to actually connect with organizations. So for example, we've just finished up a mentorship program where we worked with a great tech company, and they essentially wanted to provide some of their leaders across the business to really connect with the next generation of talented young women. And that was a great opportunity for some of their key members who, you know, represent the communities we serve, so diverse women, to really connect with the next generation. But also what was interesting is that, you know, sometimes I think people feel like, okay, but if I don't look like someone, then can I still connect? I think you can equally, just as long as you're there to listen and, you know, really take feedback and understand essentially the viewpoints of somebody else, because I think that's equally as effective as essentially looking like someone. So I think the first point that why it's so slow is definitely the access to opportunities. I mean, access to role models. Secondly, I think it's the confidence sometimes within, you know, these certain groups. We saw, you know, in the report, a third of Black and South Asian women were actually discouraged by a member of staff within their education to pursue a certain career in their education. This already, experiences like this unconsciously impacts your ability, you know, to put yourself forward with full confidence, because sometimes you struggle to find those, again, role models. But then if it's, you know, you're experiencing in your own education system, again, I've had similar experiences where, you know, I don't have anyone who, well, I'm being discouraged, that essentially slows down your position. So when applications open essentially in September, you may delay and actually apply in January. And I've seen that time over time. Again, where, you know, where my organization comes in and what we really do is, you know, support organizations by providing them a chance again to connect with, you know, great talent and provide the opportunities to young women. You would be surprised on how many great talent, great, you know, women who fall within this category are looking for opportunities, but just sometimes feel like, you know, I don't know where to look, or I don't know, you know, what else is out there. We saw that with the 2 young women that we placed within Totaljobs and the event soon that we'll be organizing, is that, again, if you have that confidence knocked, is an issue. But when you have organizations actually saying, no, we have these opportunities and we want minds like you, we want people like you, it's our industry is open for you, you know, that dismantles all of the challenges that they faced within, you know, the education system, and it's really strong. I think another reason why, you know, unfortunately the process takes longer for, you know, women within this group is the impact of the halo effect, right? So the halo effect essentially is a phenomenon where you are likely to hire like for like. You know, if you see someone who looks like you, or, you know, enjoys some of the similar things that you enjoy, you know, so they come to an interview process and they're, you know, maybe saying books that you read, or, you know, just activities that you do on the weekend, you believe they actually could fit well, you know, they could fit better in the organization. So you almost see like they have a halo on top of them. And sometimes I think, you know, certain groups, if you are unable to connect, but they're still just as talented, miss out on opportunities and are not afforded them. So I think here it's, you know, I don't think my organization can really help, but it is just with this point, but I think it's mainly the training of, you know, constantly making sure that if you are, you know, a hiring manager, you are constantly checking your biases and making sure that you are still, you know, removing those unconscious biases and making sure you're still being a great ally by understanding from their perspective that, okay, we may not be similar on this standpoint. However, you know, that's exactly why we would love someone like you in our organizations to teach us some new things that we're not afforded. And I think the last point I definitely want to mention when it comes to, you know, why it takes so long is language. And we saw in the report again, 75% of Black women and then 65% of South Asian women feel like they have to, you know, tone down or basically like, you know, code switch, so change fundamental elements of who they are. So what happens is they don't feel comfortable enough to show and represent their true self. If you cannot show up as your authentic self, I think that already just hinders your progression. And I think it's important for us to remember as well, we have different versions of ourselves. I'm not going to bring the version of that I am with my friends to the workforce. I understand there is, there's nuance to this, and like, it's very different. However, you still need to feel like you can be yourself in the workforce and show certain elements that are suitable and appropriate. And so many just unfortunately do not feel like that. And I think, again, where my organization lends itself and what we do really well is support great companies who essentially want to start building that connection and showing, again, talent that they can be the authentic self and they can show up, in their best possible manner. And, we have leaders who, again, represent them or are keen to see them in their full light, because, again, you only do the best work if you are essentially, the best.
And if you feel safe
yourself
as well, and like nurtured. And I think that my understanding of the report and the data of the report, obviously you guys are all experts in this field, is I've taken away that the interview process is actually one of the biggest barriers, because the report really outlines how, women of color, or Black and South Asian women specifically, have really high levels of ambition, and they're noted as maintaining those ambition levels kind of as they go throughout the workforce. But the initial stopgap into getting into a job is that much longer despite that. And I think that that really speaks into kind of recommendations that we've made around having a multi-ethnic panel at interview stage, because even if somebody passes the interview stage and they feel that they've done well and they've performed and they have the key skills and attributes to perform the role, I think that it can very easily become a situation where they're like, well, actually, I was interviewed by a panel that I don't, kind of see myself working with, and then maybe not even accepting the job offer if they're successful in getting it. And I think that that speaks. And I think that this goes really well, Tina, into kind of some of the research that you've done. So like we said, 79% of Black and South Asian women say that they've had to deal with discrimination in the workplace. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit on the impact that this has had on well-being, and any advice that you can give for businesses to deal with and maybe prevent those covert allegations of discriminations that we're seeing, like microaggressions.
Yeah. I mean, that's a brilliant question, and it's so multifaceted. I know, Sarika, when we did the focus groups, there was a stage in both where we all just kind of went, this is heavy, this is sad, because whenever people would share their experiences and the impact of it, we all felt it. We all know what it's like, because we've all been through it. So we all know what it is to have your confidence shattered because of discrimination and racial trauma in the workplace. We know what it is to have to really fight to keep your self-confidence, self-esteem up in the workplace, and what that takes and the energy it takes, because everything around you is telling you that you're less than, or you're just here. I don't know really why you're here, but you're just here. And the idea of the covert forms of racism plays a really big part in it. When we asked the question around discrimination faced, everyone said they'd faced microaggression. And this ranges from, people feeling entitled to just come and touch your hair, people commenting on how good your English is, or people insinuating that you can't be from Britain by, really prodding into where you're from. No, I mean, where you're from.
Where are you really from? Yeah.
I'm not British. I'm Zimbabwean, so it doesn't apply to me. But if I was, and I told you I'm from Bristol, let's not keep poking and prodding. I'm from Bristol. End of story. And it ranges from that to being interrupted in meetings, being spoken over, having your ideas in meetings repackaged and celebrated where no one seemed to hear when you said it. And all of this just makes you feel invisible, and is a barrier that you have to fight through. You have to constantly be psyching yourself up to have these conversations of, when you spoke over me in that meeting, it made me feel this way, and I'd like you to please consider what made you think it's okay to interrupt me, and not do that in the future. And that's exhausting. And there's normally power dynamics at play there. Black and South Asian women can also be experiencing some kind of precarity in their job, because we know that they're not represented in senior levels, so they're usually relatively junior. So it's things like that that are just draining those cognitive resources that you have, on top of the fact that you're coming in with the societal manifestations of racism. You've just had a conversation with your daughter in the morning about how her white friends are more beautiful because they're white and they've got straight hair. True story. These are conversations that I've had with my daughter, and then had to go into the workplace, and then had to face and had to kind of have the struggles that I've explained earlier. So we were really united in understanding that the impact of discrimination is huge, and it's not understood in workplaces. So when it comes to that, it's really important for organizations to really get to understand how covert discrimination comes out, how it manifests, how it looks, and then also to look at it specifically within their organization. So working with your racially minority staff, do surveys, have conversations with them, and use that to inform strategies and activities on how you're going to combat it. We run managing and mitigating bias workshops, and we will talk about how unconscious bias develops, how we all have it, and give some tools about how to combat it, because it's unconscious. We don't know we're doing it. And when it comes to racism and gender bias, it's so ingrained in society that we don't know what we don't know until we're kind of faced with the data, and we're forced to really dig into it. And that's what we're hoping this does. This opens up people's eyes that there is an issue that organizations need to dig deeper into. So we know from our data, 62% of Black and South Asian women said they were experiencing well-being issues at work. And from my experience in higher education, I know that students will be reluctant to go to well-being services because they're predominantly white, and the conversation is probably focused heavily on explaining what happened and why it's racist. And that's exhausting, like just even having to kind of convince someone that what happened to you was racist, because they can only see it through their own lens, and people are not trained in how racial trauma manifests, and they're not able to provide that support.
As well, Tina, I was just going to say, so sorry to interrupt you, but with the thing with microaggressions is it's really hard to define and to say and to put your finger on it and say, no, this is racist, this is what I've experienced. Because if you're not looking at it through a lens and you're looking at it from the other side, it can be so hard to actually to describe it and to put your finger on it.
Exactly. So that's exactly it. It's not microaggressions, covert racism, not easily identifiable. You have to be taught how to identify it. As a Black woman, I had to be taught how to identify it. So I think people might feel uncomfortable. That's how it probably starts. Something's just happened. It's made me feel uncomfortable. And then we get to have the language around it. And the more people that have language around it, it means that allyship happens more in the workplace as well. So that when you see it happening, it's not always on the Black woman or the South Asian woman to speak up, but more people are speaking up. And again, that's something that alleviates that kind of well-being issues that come up, because you're not the only one combating it. So in terms of what organizations can do, I do strongly advise investing in some good evidence-based training. If your organization does not know what unconscious biases or microaggressions, racism, get to grips with that. Get to grips with how that looks and how that manifests. There are organizations, I know in higher education, where well-being services are predominantly white. They will kind of have a consultants company they work with that specializes in racial trauma and by ethnic minority people for ethnic minority people. So that's another option to really show that we understand that what you're going through needs that specialist support. There was some really good advice as well that the women in the studies gave, which included paid time off, assessing workload, access to a counselor, reduced workload. So there are those practical tools that are in the report that employers can use as well. But I would always say that it needs to be evidence-led and collaboratively put together. So look at your data, work with your people, understand what it looks like within your local context, and invest in your people, invest in creating environments in which everyone thrives. And I loved that, we're talking about what Victoria was talking about. So it's often that I'll hear stories about how someone having a different viewpoint in life was able to make a positive impact in the policies or procedures for a company. We need people to thrive because they bring different things to the plate.
Yeah.
We're serving a diverse community, and if they're not thriving, if they're not bringing their whole selves into the workplace, we're going to miss out, and we're going to keep perpetuating systems that are disadvantaging other people. So this is fundamentally it's just important across the board to get right.
Definitely. And I think that just on the unconscious bias and it existing within all of us, Sarika, can you explain what it means, kind of its impact, how this can affect meritocracy, and what businesses can actually do to kind of overcome?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, everyone. I think the discussion, just to touch on, Victoria, you mentioned the halo effect. So unconscious bias is part of that. We often talk about halo and horns. So there's these invisible horns that might pop up, and it could be anything. It doesn't have to be gender or race. It could just be, I don't like this color, I don't like this type of food. But unfortunately, in the workplace, when that overlaps and upholds the bias in society. So, today, gender and racial discrimination, that's when you're in quite a difficult situation with unconscious bias. So I just need to emphasize that everyone, every single human being, by virtue of being a human, is going to have bias. And at the Diversity Trust, we all talk about it. We all talk about our own bias, and it's a very challenging area to admit. Okay, I have bias, and it is there for psychological reasons. So it's a psychological phenomenon, and it's well documented, and it gives you that psychological safety because you want to be, psychologically safe. But at the same time, it's also becoming toxic. So the report has clearly shown how it's operating in a toxic way at every stage of the career. So whether it's at the application phase, the face that fits, finding the job, which job do you get? Is it the lower paid job? Is it the job that doesn't really match your level of experience? Then, at the next stage progression, the white men are taking the lift, and the women of color are told to go take the stairs. In obviously in a not in a literal sense, but and then at leadership, not having any allies, being the first and only, and wondering what's going on. Every day, experiencing these microaggressions. By that we mean, these comments, as Tina's outlined in, very clearly, and that impacts your well-being, your ability to perform. And you might have colleagues who'd say, well, we all face stress, we all face these issues, but when it interacts with these systemic problems in the world and real bias, that's when workplaces have to think about it. So I think meritocracy, if it really existed, we would see everyone at the table, everyone represented. And unfortunately, as we know, women of colour are nowhere near that. So I think unconscious bias, I guess the key thing is really, eliminating that fear and being open and having that honesty and integrity. So, if your company's struggling to deal with that, sometimes bringing in trained facilitators, someone external to take a fresh look at that and say, hang on, what's on there, and really just listening. We've mentioned gaslighting. This is clearly a problem, and if you keep saying there's no problem and asking women to evidence why they have a problem, they feel like they are the problem, and they will walk with their feet, or they will just struggle to thrive in the workplace. So that's another area, just being skeptical, challenging. Okay, why do I think that's not a problem? That might be a better question to ask. And obviously things need to be investigated, but just like you address any other business risk or any business problem, you address fraud, you address other issues, you should be looking at creating a culture of speaking up, acknowledging these issues, and really understanding these issues and where they exist and pinpointing them in your organization. And that can be really hard to do when, unfortunately, as the report shows, this is a very widespread problem. And it is becoming embarrassing. Britain today is meant to be a global leader. It's meant to be a global and diverse, kind of global society. And you see it all over the world, really, where there's still kind of issues here, and it does need to be addressed. And I think it's a real shame when you've got women with so much talent, so much determination, so much to show, but these barriers they have to face at every single stage. It's just about time that those are addressed. So I think unconscious bias is a big part of it. Culture change, well-being, all of those things become part of the package to really tackle these issues.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that I've picked up on that all three of you have made note of in answering your questions is kind of, it's tiring. It makes people tired, and people are never going to perform their best. You're fostering an environment that's placing limitations on people actively. And then it's, at the end of the day, it's the business that suffers. When individual employees start to suffer, then it's the business. So it's not fruitful. What I'm going to do is we do have our marketing team who are obviously working to do all the tech behind the scenes. So I'm just going to ask my colleague Ellie if we've got questions in the chat box, and if we've got time to kind of answer any live. Any that we don't have time to answer today on the call, then we will divvy out between us and send through in email format where possible.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions, Amber, so I'll just read this one out, and the panel or yourself feel free to jump in. So it says, thank you for all the information and the great ideas on how to improve. My question would be, with so much work to be done, where do you think we should start first?
So we were actually asking, I went to a workshop a couple of weeks ago in our head office in Dusseldorf, and this was a key thing that they asked. So I've got an idea on this, but I'd be really interested to hear what you guys say. And I think we were focusing on where to start, and it's data collection, because how can you have an image or an idea or a goal that you're working towards if you don't know where you are right now? But I'd be keen to see if you guys kind of agree with that and understand that.
Yeah, I'd agree. So when we're working on any kind of charter, we're led by underlying principles, and some of these include acknowledging that there is racism in the workplace. So kind of working together with your whole organization to think about what is your understanding of how racism manifests in your organization, but always that in conjunction with that kind of exercise of bringing people together is definitely the data. And it's really important to get some advice on that if you've never done data to do with inclusion, because it is nuanced. This is the part where you can't just kind of survey everyone and look at overall percentages. You have to drill into the data and what it's telling you. You have to look at the qualitative and quantitative comments, because we do find some people would say we're really diverse, but if you ask people about the experiences within your workplace, there are issues that will come up. Or we'll find that, if you don't drill into what the Black women or the South Asian women are saying, you might find that, if you're looking at kind of racially minoritized, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, and white, that's not going to give you the nuances of the experiences of that community, because it's not a homogenous group. We don't all have the same experiences of the workplace. And so it's really important to get advice on how to collate and interpret data when it comes to inclusion if you don't have the specific expertise.
Amazing. Thanks, Tina. Have you guys got anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to agree with Tina and just say also that this needs real commitment. I think it needs to start from whoever's in leadership at the top, saying, we're committed to this and we want to understand and we acknowledge that this is a problem. And I think acknowledging that, this is a problem is really the first step in making a formal commitment, if you haven't already done so, and then just building on it with data and strategies. But yeah, that's sometimes the first step.
Definitely. And do you think that as well, like we speak about underrepresentation, but how impactful do you think it is having a leadership team that isn't reflective of, we hear about this a lot, leadership teams that aren't reflective of maybe the employee base or what ambitions that they might have for having a kind of diverse workforce? Do you think that it mirrors and that message has to come from top down?
Yeah, 100%. I would 100%. Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to, Victoria or anyone wants to kind of elaborate, but yeah, absolutely.
I think 100%. I think when it comes to the work I do and where I focus mainly with, junior and entry, again, if you don't see your leadership team that represents you, how does that serve you? Do you see yourself, progressing as well? And then I also think diversity of thought and experience is so important, because if you don't have someone who's lived a certain life or gone for a certain thing, you miss out on the experiences of certain groups. So I think it's so important to have a leadership team that not only reflects your employees, but also the customers you serve as well, which is important.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's something about trust there as well, especially if you're doing this exercise of wanting to start to think about racial inclusion. If you're kind of a white leadership group behind closed doors, no one's going to trust that you know what you're doing or that you understand their voice or that they're represented. So even just in general, people need to be able to trust in their leadership, and when it doesn't represent them, that's a problem.
And just agreed. And just to add to that as well, on the gender side and the race side, and also every other side, and what Victoria's saying, there does need to be diversity of thought and approach, and that usually results in better business performance, because you can see, you don't have those blind spots. Okay, I don't understand this risk, and your customer base and so on. You can definitely tackle things. It creates more creativity and makes a company more dynamic. So, and if you don't have that at the moment, can you get advice? Can you get consulting to kind of bring that in?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's some really good conversation topics. I'm just going to ask Ellie if we've got time for one last question.
Yes, sounds good. I think we can squeeze this last one in. So we've had a couple of questions around code switching. So I'm just going to combine a couple of them. So essentially around, so what are some of the ways that companies are currently putting pressure on people to code switch? And with that in mind, what improvements do employers need to be focusing on to enable people who are minoritized or who are underrepresented to feel more free to be themselves and more able to celebrate their culture, for example?
I can take this. I think it's even as smaller things as like hair, which is so fundamental for these particular groups. And sometimes, it's not related to language, but what is perceived as professional. If someone is coming and they may have certain African cultures have, wear their hair in a different way, whether it's an afro or it's, braids, and certain groups may feel like, oh, this is not professional, or dreadlocks, for example, and this could affect my performance. So I think it's finding ways actually to, again, show here that you can come in your full self, because you need to be your full self at work. So I think sometimes appearance does have a really big part to play, and when it comes to how you represent and how you show up.
Okay.
Are we over? Are we done?
I think if you've got something to say, go ahead and say.
I was just going to quickly say, how are complaints received? If someone comes and says, oh, do you know, someone made a comment about my hair, how is that received by the organization? Is it taken seriously? Is that person reprimanded in some way? What happens? Or are you told, oh, it's just a comment, it was just, so things like that also add to the kind of the culture and how people will know that tells someone you're the one who needs to change. If you're not happy about how we operate, you need to change. You need to go change your hair if you don't like people commenting about it. And that's not what we want to communicate. So just to quickly put that in.
Yeah, and my one word, I think also food. I've had lots of people say, oh, what's that food? Or, oh, that's the smelly food. Just allow people to bring whatever food and just explore different types of culture. Yeah.
Definitely. Amazing. I think we could have gone on all day, to be honest, girls. But yeah, no, I wanted to thank you all so much for the work that you've done and the involvement that you've had in the report, and also for taking your time to come on this webinar with myself this morning. It's been really great kind of meeting you and going through this process with you. I'm sure that we've got lots more questions in the question box, so we will, of course, see if we can answer those. We'll divvy them out between us and respond on email in the next coming days. An email will be sent out tomorrow with a recording of the session for anyone who's maybe had connection issues or who's had to drop off for any point, or who just wants to share it with their teams back internally in their organisation. So yeah, one last massive thank you for joining, and we will see you again next time.
Incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.